It's November 1993. Deep Purple is on tour in Helsinki, Finland. The reunion, the one the fans had been begging for since the band first broke up, has been running for 9 years. Albums, world tours, arenas packed full. By any measure, the comeback worked. And then, without warning, Ritchie Blackmore walked off stage and didn't come back. Not for the night, for good. He quit in the middle of a tour. He sent word through management. He was done with Deep Purple for the second time. This was not unusual for Ritchie Blackmore. He had already done it once before, in 1975. He had already built one of the greatest hard rock bands in history, decided it wasn't enough, torn it apart, built something new, torn that apart too, rebuilt the original, and then torched it again. He fired more than a dozen musicians over the course of his career, sometimes with a phone call, sometimes with a note, sometimes with no explanation at all. Ritchie Blackmore was, by almost every account from people who worked with him, a genius. He was also, by those same accounts, close to impossible to work for. This is the story of the man who couldn't stop leaving and what he was actually running toward. Richard Hugh Blackmore was born on April 14, 1945, in Weston-super-Mare, England. His family moved to Heston, Middlesex, where his father gave him his first guitar at age 11. What the father also gave him, less willingly received at the time, were lessons in classical music theory, scales, counterpoint, structure, the kind of rigorous technical foundation that most rock guitarists never had and never wanted. Blackmore hated it at the time. He would use it for the rest of his life. By his late teens, he was already working as a session guitarist in London's studio scene, playing for Joe Meek, backing Screaming Lord Sutch, picking up whatever came through the door. In 1964, he played on Have I the Right by the Honeycombs, a song that went to #1 in the UK. Nobody knew his name. He was 19 years old and already invisible in the industry he would later dominate. Deep Purple came together in 1968, Blackmore and John Lord on keyboards as the engine, with Rod Evans on vocals, Nick Simper on bass, Ian Pace on drums. The first records were psychedelic, a little prog, not quite anything in particular. They sold modestly. Blackmore was already dissatisfied. In 1969, he moved. Evans and Simper were out. Ian Gillan came in on vocals, Roger Glover on bass. The band nobody had heard of suddenly became the band that would write the rules for hard rock in the 1970s. In Rock came out in 1970, Fireball in 1971, Machine Head in 1972, recorded in Montreux after a fire broke out during a Frank Zappa concert and the smoke rolled across the lake, the image that became Smoke on the Water. Highway Star, Child in Time, Space Truckin'. The Mark II lineup of Deep Purple was one of the loudest, most technically dangerous bands on earth. And Blackmore and Ian Gillan were fighting constantly, not just creatively. According to Gillan's own memoirs, physically. Two very different personalities in a very small space, both convinced they were right, neither willing to move. Gillan left in June 1973. Glover was dismissed. Blackmore got what he thought he wanted, new blood, new direction. David Coverdale came in, Glenn Hughes on bass and vocals. But what Coverdale and Hughes brought was funk and soul, and a looseness that had nothing to do with Blackmore's vision. He called their sound shoeshine music. He sat in rehearsals not playing. He stopped talking for days at a time. He left on April 7, 1975, after the band's final show in Paris. He had already been building his exit. While still technically a member of Deep Purple, Blackmore had been listening to Ronnie James Dio, who fronted a band called Elf. The voice was extraordinary, operatic, powerful, with a dramatic weight that matched exactly what Blackmore was trying to do. Within weeks of leaving Deep Purple, Blackmore had assembled what would become Rainbow. The first Rainbow album came out in 1975. Rising followed in 1976, and that record, with Cozy Powell on drums and a lineup Blackmore had assembled by firing almost everyone from the original band, became one of the defining albums of European hard rock. Gates of Babylon, Stargazer, Dio at the absolute peak of his powers, Blackmore playing with a precision and a darkness that nobody else in the genre could match. Then he fired Dio. Not because Dio was bad, because Blackmore wanted something different. He wanted commercial radio. He wanted hits. He pushed Rainbow toward AOR pop rock, toward songs that could get played on American FM stations, toward a softer sound built for charts rather than cathedrals. Dio saw where it was going and left. He walked directly into Black Sabbath, where he made Heaven and Hell and recorded some of the finest work of his career. Blackmore got his hits. Since You've Been Gone in 1979, I Surrender in 1981, Stone Cold in 1982. The music was polished, professional, and popular. It was also, by most accounts, including Blackmore's own later statements, not what he was actually interested in. He went through more than a dozen band members over Rainbow's 9-year run: guitarists, keyboard players, vocalists. He could not hold a lineup together for more than a year or two before someone was dismissed or walked. In 1984, the call came. The original Mark II lineup, Gillan, Glover, Lord, Pace, and Blackmore, agreed to reunite. Perfect Strangers came out and was a genuine success. The fans who had been waiting a decade got exactly what they wanted. The tension returned almost immediately. Blackmore and Gillan were the same two people they had always been, locked in the same dynamic. By 1989, Gillan was gone again. He came back in 1992. And then, in November 1993, in Helsinki, Blackmore made his decision and walked. Joe Satriani came in as a touring replacement, a technically brilliant guitarist with no personal history with the band, filling a hole that couldn't really be filled. Then Steve Morse joined permanently. He is still with Deep Purple today. Blackmore, meanwhile, quietly rebuilt Rainbow one more time, with an almost entirely new lineup including vocalist Doogie White. One album came out in 1995, Stranger in Us All. By 1997, he had closed it down again. For years he had been sitting in his home studio with Candace Knight, his partner, later his wife, listening to music that had nothing to do with amplifiers or Marshall stacks or arena rock. Renaissance music, medieval folk, lute and hurdy-gurdy. Music from the 16th century played in the way it was meant to be played, with quiet precision and historical care, in theaters and castle courtyards and at Renaissance fairs. Blackmore's Night released their first album in 1997. There have been more than 14 records since. Ritchie and Candace married in 2008. He plays lute on most of the recordings. When he picks up an electric guitar now, it is occasional, careful, almost reluctant. In interviews, he has said something that surprised people who thought they understood him. He said he never really liked rock and roll. He liked blues. He liked classical music. And somewhere along the way, he realized he had been performing a version of himself that wasn't quite honest. That was the thing about all the walkouts, the firing of Dio, the 2 departures from Deep Purple, the AOR detour with Rainbow, the complete vanishing act into medieval folk. From the outside, it looked like a man who couldn't commit, couldn't work with anyone, couldn't hold a vision together for more than a few years before destroying it. From the inside, from what Blackmore himself has said, and from the shape of a career that ended in exactly the place it might have begun if his father had let him keep studying classical theory, it looks like something different. A man who spent 30 years in the wrong room, building spectacular things he didn't quite believe in, until he finally found the door. The fans who followed him through Deep Purple, through Rainbow, through 2 reunions and 4 lineups, many of them were furious when he disappeared into the 16th century. They felt abandoned, and they weren't entirely wrong. He was leaving them. He had been leaving them in one way or another since 1975. But Ritchie Blackmore spent the last chapter of his career doing exactly what he wanted, in the way he wanted, with the person he loved. And if that means trading smoke on the water for a lute solo in a castle garden, he seems to have made his peace with the trade. If you like this story, hit the video showing on your screen right now. There's another one waiting, and it's just as complicated.